Good morning, class, and welcome to this week's live session on the family. So this is one of my favorite topics to talk about and teach because this is a topic that all of us can relate to because we all come from a family. Maybe we've gone through some lectures already where, you say, well, this topic is not very relevant to me. It doesn't really hit home, or, I can somewhat, associate myself with the different topics, but this is definitely a topic where everyone comes from a family. We all have family members, whether we like it or not, right? And so again, it's very close to what we know, right? So this week, I was also going to let you know that if you really enjoyed this week's lecture, in the spring, there will be a in-class course taught on the family and marriage, and that will be Wednesday night. So if you're very interested in the family and marriage, please sign up. It is a wonderful, wonderful class to take where we do go week by week, going into each individual topic and going more in depth in what makes a family and what makes a marriage. So one of the questions that I like to start when I do my face-to-face classes is, well, what does family mean to you? Is it required to have a family? Do families have to include children? I believe this is one of the questions that we're going to be talking about this week in discussion. What does it take to be a family member? I've had students where they tell me, Ms. White, I have family members that I wish I was not related to, but they're my family members, I've had students say, I consider my best friend being part of my family. Is that being family? Should people marry? Why or why not? What are the benefits? And we'll be talking about that this week as well. Is getting married too easy? With the divorce rate now of 1 in 2, a lot of people would say that, what is the point of getting married if, I have a 50% chance of getting a divorce? But then again, on someone's wedding day, how often do we ask someone as they're walking down the aisle, so are you sure you really want to do this? Because you have a 50% chance that it's not going to work, or it's going to work or it's not going to work, right? So we still are very much set on the notion of getting married, but we're starting to see that we're getting married at an older age, and there are various reasons as to why that is. The definition of the family. When we think of the family, we think of the traditional 1950s family where it's the husband coming home from work, the mom's wearing her finest pearls, she has the food set on the table, and they have the 2.5 kids, that poor half child, with the white picket fence and the dog, So a lot of us sometimes, hold on to that traditional family. And then we forget that that's more imagination than reality. Back in the 1950s when it was, seen as the nuclear family, right, of this perfect family, there was a lot of violence within the family home between the husband and the wife. And so domestic violence was at an all-time rate, but the laws were not implemented that we have now in terms of, domestic violence. But again, when we think of the 50s, we think of this, wonderful, perfect family. Everyone has it put together. Everyone's hair is always done. Everyone's on time. Again, the perfect family that is not realistic, right? We socially construct the meaning of the perfect family, of what is family. So as you know, we have many different types of families. We have mom and dad, we have dad and dad, mom and mom, single dad. We have, so different variations of what exactly is a family. So we have the different descents, which is patrilineal. Patrilineal is usually the father's side, matrilineal, which is on the mother's side. So this is just the descent of the structure of the family. Now, one of the things that I like to talk about when we talk about marriage and family is at the beginning of time, it was not the way it is romanticized how it is now, right? Two people fall in love, someone proposes, there's a wedding, you march down the aisle, you have a party, and it's a wonderful, happy celebration, right? You have to think that the beginning of time for caveman days, there's no such thing as, I'm sure there was such thing as love, but when we think of the institution of marriage, it was literally as a means of survival, right? they needed to survive, survival of the fittest. They needed to make sure that they were going to live and generations were going to continue. So man, because of his genetic makeup and being, able to carry heavy things, went out and hunted, brought home the meat, and the female, the wife, the partner, was the one that would collect like berries and would make food, and would cook the meat that the man would cook, that would hunt and kill. And so again, it was more of a survival mechanism instead of love. It wasn't until we got to European during the medieval times that's when we started to see the institution of marriage, where we saw weddings actually taking place in cathedrals, in the church setting. That was where we saw what marriage, as we see it now, if we choose to get married, for example, like in a church. So marriage is a socially approved sexual union between two or more individuals that is undertaken with some idea of permanence. So we have different roles in terms of endogamy, exogamy, incest taboos. As we know, it is against the law and it is prohibited to marry someone of your cousin. Now there are various reasons besides saying, ew, that's gross, but studies have shown, right, that genetic makeup, when two family members that share the same genetic line and characteristics and chromosomes, there's a high risk of a child being born with deformities or that is sick. Types of marriage, as we know, here in the United States, we only practice monogamy, which is marriage of one husband and one wife. Shows such as like Sister Wives, and there's a couple different shows in terms of polygamy. So polygamy is the marriage of one husband and two or more wives. Depending on religions such as being Mormon, they do practice polygamy. Socially, it's not socially acceptable for the rest of society here in the United States to practice polygamy, whereas in other parts of the world it is completely normal and it's seen as prestige and respect. The more wives you're able to take on means that you're able to feed more wives and clothe more people in your household. So therefore you must have money. Therefore you receive prestige, you receive respect from the rest of your community. The patterns of courtship, as we know, courtship no longer really exists in the way that it used to, where a man and woman would walk side by side, and if they held hands, that was like pornography back then, right? Now it's, sometimes you look around and people are all up on each other making out right in public, right? So the social regulation of love and how has love gotten to the point of where we're at now, right, in terms of courting, in terms of dating? In Marriage and Family, I give the lecture of, are we even dating anymore? Or are we too busy and interested in hooking up and sleeping around with others before we find, quote unquote, the one that we want to spend our life with? Is there such thing as dating anymore? Are we just, do we want to get married? What do we look for when we're looking for someone in terms of dating, in terms of, marriage material? This is one of my favorite commercials to show, and you guys will be talking about this and discussing it in your discussion this week. First time I saw it on TV, I jumped from my chair and I ran to my husband. I said, this would be perfect for class. Okay, so make sure that you guys do watch the commercial and then also respond to the question. So Marriage and the Family in the United States, as we're starting to see, it is more socially acceptable to cohabitate before marriage, to also, also have children before marriage, also not to want to get married, but, stay together as a couple, having a partnership. We're starting to see that we are getting married in our 30s instead of our 20s, where when my mother was growing up, when she got married in her 30s, that was not socially acceptable because that was totally not the norm, because you would have thought something was wrong with her, right? So now we're starting to see that we're having our children in our mid-30s. We're starting to get married in our mid-30s. 3 of my roommates from college that are in their mid-30s are having their first child for the first time. So we're starting to see, again, you know, that we're not getting married like we used to at a young age. Arranged marriages, this is another discussion that we have more in depth in our marriage and family class in terms of, well, arranged marriages, they have such a low divorce rate. You know, do they really work? What if we implemented arranged marriages here in the United States, for example? The Family Life course, as you know, when you become parents, if you're not already parents, it's like a roller coaster. It's a various stages that you go through. For example, my husband and I are coming up on our 10th wedding anniversary, and we have 2 kids under the age of 7, right? So our roles right now are being parents to young children. As they get to junior high, that's going to be a whole new different role that we're going to take on as parents. When they're, you know, adults, when they're adult children, you know, when they get married, if they decide to get married, if they decide to have children or not. So you're adjusting to these different roles. Now, the empty nest syndrome is when all of the children have left the nest, and that's another discussion we have, is how many children leave the nest and then come back at a later time, right, because of various circumstances. But all of a sudden, the parents now have, you know, an empty house. And you figure for the last, let's say, 18 years, everything has been done for the children, right? My husband always tells me everything is for the kids, everything. And he says, oh my goodness, when they're older, it's going to be different. It's not going to be so much for the kids anymore, right? But then the couple looks at each other and says, I don't even know who you are. Well, I don't know who you are. You've been a mom. You've been a dad. You've been working. You've been, you know, tending to the kids. And so we're starting to see that there's a higher rate of divorce among the empty nesters because the couples have no idea who they are anymore. Let's see. Early child adulthood, a shortage of males employed in good jobs with adequate earnings sharply reduces the likelihood that a woman will marry or even live with a man outside of marriage. So responding to the narrow marriage market. Intermarriage and dating. In the 50s, it was illegal to date someone outside of your own race, your own ethnicity. Nowadays, we find that like mind-boggling. Like, how on earth could that be, you know, against the law? You could further expand this to gay marriage, where one day I believe that the way that we think in terms of marriage will be the same way we think of intermarriage back in the 50s, where it was not socially acceptable, but as we know, through social change, everything changes with time, and so the same, I would say. The U.S. Family Over the Life course, again, you know, once you go through different cycles, you know, in terms of your ages, you're going to encounter things. I'm in my mid-30s, and sometimes I feel like I'm 60. I feel like in the morning, things are cracking, and you're thinking, oh, that did not sound right? You know, you go through financial crisis maybe, you know, where, you know, my husband and I sit down and we look over our finances on a monthly basis. And, you know, those late night conversations that you have as parents, you know, that you don't want your kids listening because as they get older, they understand, they comprehend, they're little sponges, right? So what happens when you're at the age of 65 and beyond, right? We're starting to live to be a lot older because of technology, because of medicine. My parents' neighbor just turned 95 years old, and she is devastated because they just took her license away the first week of November for her 95th birthday because they said that she could cause harm out on the streets, you know, and she's devastated. She's thinking, you know, what's the point of, you know, if I can't drive, I can't get anywhere, then what am I doing, right? So it's the whole, you know, idea of, you know, as we get older and having to deal with that. And again, this is another topic that we talked about in family and marriage. Beyond the traditional nuclear family, as mentioned, we have step families, we have singlehood, we have single parenthood, we have cohabitation. So a lot of different types of non-traditional families that we would have. Gay and lesbian couples. A lot of times, children will be asked if they come from same-sex marriage households. Well, what is it like to have two mommies, in bed waking up, next to each other, or two dads waking up to each other, and kids respond the same way that heterosexual kids respond. That is their norm. That is what they see at home. Therefore, when, it's brought up to their attention from the outside of their home, they're kind of caught off guard because that, again, is their norm at home, right? How are families portrayed in the media? Shows 10 years ago versus present day. I'll bring that into this week's topic as well in discussion. Now, not all families are perfect, as we know. There's family violence, child abuse, incest, and sexual abuse, looking to the future as well. Again, this is another topic that I've focus on in more depth in family and marriage. I apologize if I'm really going through this really fast, right? But it's so hard to go through a topic like the family and marriage in just 1 week, right? The effects of divorce on the family. So what happens, if you come from a divorced home? Are you more likely to get a divorce as you encounter marriage in the future? The functionalist perspective in terms of the family. Functionalists emphasize the importance of family in maintaining the stability of society and the well-being of individuals. Makes sense, right? Because here's where we learn our socialization skills. Here's where we learn the norms or roles of society. They're being taught by our parents. More functions for the family. Again, more information from the functionalists. The conflict theory is seen as women is seen as sexual property. Remember, these are the Debbie Downers, right? So they always see the negative in everything. So the conflict is the natural and the necessary. The roles that we see in terms of the family members and how they change through symbols, through language, right, is seen through the interactionist perspective. So more on the conflict perspective. I'm going to go through these a little quickly. And then again, ending with symbolic interactionist. Okay? So I hope you guys enjoy this week's live session. What am I saying? It's not even live, huh? This week's video. If you guys have any questions, please email me. Please make sure that you guys are reading your instructions as well as knowing that you do have a news reflection due this week. Again, please refer to your week 1 instructions for a refresher course. Enjoy the rest of your week. I will see you guys next week. Bye-bye.